Dear students, in my earlier video, I dealt with the analysis of the poem Dava Beach. In this video, I'll deal with the themes which are prevalent in Dava Beach. Theme of loss of faith and certainty. Written during the Victorian era, Matthew Arnold's Dava Beach admits truth and laments the loss of religious faith that came with advances in various fields at the time: evolutionary, biology, geology, archaeology, and textual analysis of the Bible, to name a few. The poem senses the turn of a historical epoch and finds this change echoed in the transitional figure of the beach, the blurry border between land and sea. The poem thus asks the reader to consider what is lost in humankind's movement away from the certainty of the Christian faith. For the speaker, loss of faith equates to loss of certainty. The Deva Beach itself seems to embody this loss, both in its sights and its sounds. At first, the poem offers no clues that its main subject is the loss of faith. Instead, it begins by describing the atmosphere in which the speaker stands. The descriptions of the sea and the sound of the pebbles on the beach are lyrically beautiful at first, but they mask the eternal note of sadness that is revealed at the end of stanza 1. This sudden intrusion of sadness hints at the speaker's sense of loss, which finds full expression later in the poem. Through the symbol of the sea, the poem suggests two key ideas. Firstly, that major shifts in the fabric of society occur subtly. The beach's slow, repetitive movements symbolize the gradual but inevitable loss of faith that the speaker senses in this historical moment. Secondly, mapping the loss of religious faith onto the movement of the waves implies that these kinds of historical changes come in cycles, waves, in other words. Indeed, the speaker imagines the ancient Greek playwright Sophocles hearing the same sadness in the sea that the speaker hears now. That is, the speaker sees an analogy between the irrelevance of the classical Greek gods in the speaker's time with the coming irrelevance of the Christian God in the near future. That doesn't mean that religious faith will return, but more that something will come along to take its place, in this case, the dominance of science. The speaker's position on this loss of religious faith becomes clear in the third stanza. Faith once made the world full and bright, that is, it offered comfort and joy in its certainty. Its loss then represents melancholy. What's more, the sea of faith once touched the shores of the entire world, but is now withdrawing. The poem is essentially saying that this loss of faith is global, in turn suggesting the vast reach of scientific advancements at the time. The speaker doubles down on the idea that scientific advancement represents a loss rather than a gain in the poem's final couplet, saying that the new era will herald confused alarms of struggle and flight, and ignorant armies flashing by night. In other words, the speaker believes that scientific advancement will bring only scientific, not spiritual, certainty and will lead to more doubt and questioning, which is in fact an important part of the scientific method of inquiry. Overall, then, the poem expresses a kind of resignation. The speaker fully admits the change that is in process. It is as inevitable as the waves rising and falling, and challenges the reader to consider whether this loss of faith is progress or a wrong turn. Deva Beach, then, is a deeply pessimistic poem that questions the dominant values of its day and embodies the sense of grief that some felt at the prospect of the loss of religion. This questioning will stand up in the 21st century, calling on its readers to examine whether their own lives are spiritually fulfilled. Next theme is theme of nature and alienation. Linked to the idea of a loss of faith is a shift in the way people relate to the natural environment. Written shortly after the era of the Romantic poets, who praised nature as an antidote to overtly rational thinking, Davabi questions humankind's relationship with nature. Instead of finding happiness or the sublime in the natural environment, the speaker finds a deep sense of sorrow even while admitting on the beach's beauty. The cold indifference and vast power of the natural world make the speaker feel small and insignificant. The poem is therefore an attempt to capture the complexity of human experience as just one part of the natural world rather than its center. Central to the poem is an implicit admission that mankind is merely one part of a larger system, the natural world. The natural scene prompts the speaker to think about timescales that make their own life feel less significant. The speaker looks out on a scene that is, on the one hand, beautiful, but on the other, a powerful reminder of nature's indifference to humankind. The beach and the sea are by far the most prominent figures in the poem. As products of millions of years of erosion and water movement, they represent scales of time well beyond the expense of human life and perhaps beyond the mind's capacity to comprehend them too. This sense of deep time alienates the speaker from the natural scene that the speaker is observing. The scene makes the speaker feel small and creates a feeling that nature is almost antagonistic towards the trials of humankind, as demonstrated by the harsh sound of the beach, which rose with the eternal note of sadness as the pebbles moved with the waves. The mention of eternity yes specifically links the idea of time to the speaker's alienation. Without God to provide the certainty of eternal afterlife, the time scales evoked by nature seem almost mocking of humankind's limited place in the world. The speaker's thoughts about the ancient Greek playwright Sophocles further emphasizes the tragedy that the speaker believes is occurring. The speaker imagines Sophocles hearing the same loneliness and sorrow in the sea as the speaker does in the poem. For the speaker, human life is fundamentally sad, and Sophocles, as a writer of tragedy, must have heard that same sadness in the sea. On the one hand, then, the poem argues that nature has always had this alienating effect, but on the other hand, it also seems that the speaker is particularly mindful of the present moment, the moment when the poem was written. The use of present tense throughout demonstrates that the speaker feels that the current moment is an especially alternate, alienating time. The natural setting of the poem then makes the speaker question everything about human existence, a state that was once made certain by religious faith. There is a paradoxical nature about the beach. It is always shifting in shape, yet it can stay roughly as it is for millions of years, seemingly always in transition and always the same. This paradox embodies the way in which people try to make sense of their lives while the world itself offers no certainty. In this way, the poem is a precursor of the 20th century existentialism and is often considered ahead of its time. Ultimately, Dover Beach exposes the underlying melancholy of awe-inspiring natural sights. While the speaker does admit to the scene's beauty, that beauty doesn't compensate for the way in which the scene makes the speaker feel small and insignificant. Love. Next theme is the theme of love. At the retreat of religion, causing a crisis of spiritual faith, the speaker turns to love as an answer for the loss of God. Perhaps the poem suggests love between people can compensate for the loss of the connection between God and mankind. But the poem only argues that love has the possibility of creating the certainty that religion once did. It doesn't make the case that this is inevitable. It is generally agreed that Arnold wrote Dover Beach while on his honeymoon. Whether or not this is definitely true, the speaker is certainly not alone in the poem. The speaker's interactions with an off-page lover demonstrates the possible restoration of a different kind of faith in love rather than in God. The first five lines of the poem give nothing away in terms of whether the speaker has an addressee beyond the reader. But lines 6 and 8 often offer clear instructions to the speaker's companion to come and share the experience of looking out at the beach. Given that the beach scene inspires such melancholy in the speaker's attempt to share the experience is an argument for intimacy and honesty between people. Togetherness, the poem argues, can help in any situation. Stanza 2 and 3, however, lack the direct address to the other person and therefore seem to show the speaker retreating into their own psyche. The melancholy of the sea echoes the loss of religion and almost swamps the speaker's psyche entirely. But out of these depths come the final stanza, which is spoken directly to the speaker's lover. If the two lovers can be true to one another, suggests the speaker, then that will in part provide solace and certainty in a world that offers neither of these. False sense of security, which will unravel as the poem goes on, a strategy that mirrors the way that the poem chronicles a move away from faith and certainty towards doubt and anxiety. The sea. The sea is a multi-functioning symbol that courses throughout the entire poem. At first, the sea is still and calm, creating a sense of security that the poem eventually undoes. But the speaker begins to observe the sea more closely and notices that it is not as calm as it first seemed. The detail of the observation increases alongside the speaker's increasingly troubled psyche. The sound of the sea and the way it moves the pebbles becomes unnerving. In this sense, then the sea is a symbol for the speaker's own inner thoughts. The sea also functions as a representation of time. In the second stanza, the sea becomes a vehicle through which the speaker is mentally transported to ancient Greece. The body of water that covers the earth has always been there, and the speaker imagines Sophocles, the great Greek tragedian, reading the same symbol of misery in the sea as the speaker does. It's in part a symbol of the past as well as the way the connections between humans across eras. A third figurative use of the sea is in the speaker's concept of the Sea of Grace in its uniformity and far-reaching connectivity. The speaker reads a similarity to the way that religion once covered the world. The sea then is also a representation of the globe itself and religion's place within it. So these are the symbols present in Deva Beach. Thank you.